Good morning, sisters. Welcome to Reading Lesson 1 on Reading Aloud. Why read aloud? There are a couple of good reasons why we would want to read aloud, especially when we are learning a new language. The first is to hear your own voice and become comfortable with the way it expresses the English language. The second is to allow others to hear your own voice while you cultivate the habit of public reading. You may come up with other good reasons to read aloud. What to read aloud? The material that you're studying, so that you can read it again in class when you are referring to it. The material that you pray, so that when you read aloud, either in Mass or at prayer, you'll do so with a practiced voice. Fun reading, bedtime stories, newspaper articles, road signs, children's stories, cereal boxes, etc. You may come up with other things to read aloud. When to read aloud? As often as you get the chance, alone and in public. Where to read aloud? Anywhere, with or without an audience. To whom to read aloud? The answer to this is quite simple. To anyone. Start with anyone who will listen. A general rule is that if you cannot captivate your audience, at least find captive audiences. Fellow sisters make good captive audiences. Our final question is how to read aloud. Let's practice. But first, there is a funny clip from an American film called Singing in the Rain. It is about a young actress who has to take elocution lessons. She has to take lessons in speaking. Let's listen to how she does.
Now, ta-te-ti-to-tu.
Ta-te-ti-to-tu.
No, Miss Lamont, round tones, round tones. Now let me hear you read your line.
And I can't stand 'em.
And I can't stand him.
And I can't stand 'em.
Can't.
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 That was pretty funny. But it is like what we are trying to do here. When I read aloud, I say certain sounds in a certain way. You hear those sounds in the way that I am saying them, but your brain translates them into the way that you would say them, so that if you were to repeat what it was I said, you would repeat it in your own way. Let's try a game. The game is called the tongue twister. From the same film, Singing in the Rain, our elocution lessons continue. In this case, for a different set of actors. The tongue twister is Moses supposes his toes are roses, but Moses supposes erroneously. For Moses, he knowses his toes aren't roses, as Moses supposes his toes to be. Let's see how Gene Kelly does it.
Moses supposes his toes are roses, but Moses supposes erroneously. But Moses, he noses, his toes aren't roses, as Moses supposes his toes to be. Moses supposes his toes are roses, but Moses supposes erroneously. A Mose is a Mose, a rose is a rose, a toes is a toes. Hoop-de-doodly-doodle. Moses supposes his toes are roses, but Moses supposes erroneously. A Moses, he noses, his toes aren't roses, as Moses supposes his toes to be. Moses, toes are roses. Moses, my Moses, as Moses supposes his Moses to be. Roses, the roses, the roses, the roses, the roses, but Moses supposes his Moses couldn't be a lily or a happy, happy dilly. It's gotta be a rose, cause it rhymes with Moses. Moses!
The poor teacher. This may also be your reaction to elocution lessons. Let's start with some you know. This is a Vietnamese tongue twister. It is also an example of a bilabial consonant sound. Let's listen to it in Vietnamese.
Bà ba béo, bánh bèo, bánh bò, bánh bao. Bên bờ biển, bên bờ bể, bừa bãi, bị bắt, bót, ba bốn bận.
Now you try it. All right. You are comfortable with the bilabial in Vietnamese. We give tongue twisters to our children who are learning English in order to give them practice with the language. There are tongue twisters in every language. And I've given you a link in the reading section with over 500 tongue twisters in English. These will be fun to practice. Let's begin by practicing an English bilabial consonant sound. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. You say it. You see the bilabial p repeats itself. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Now, the trick to tongue twisters is to say them fast. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. You try it. How fast can you say it? Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. The trick is to say it without making a mistake. Here is another Vietnamese tongue twister. This deals with alveolar stops or consonants. I do not have my own recording, so I will give you time to say it. Notice where your tongue keeps hitting as you say that T out loud. It should be hitting the alveolar ridge that area at the top of your mouth, just above your teeth. If your tongue is hitting in a different area, then these T sounds are not true alveolars. Let's try it in English. Here we have alveolar sounds mixed in with linguodentals. That is, sounds that you make by putting your tongue between your teeth. Th, as in Sister Martha. Sister Martha. I will say it first. Tom, alveolar, through, linguodental, Tim, alveolar, 3, thumb, tax. You can see we have 1, 2, 3 alveolars and 1, 2, 3 linguodentals. Let's try saying it. Tom, through, Tim, 3, thumb, tax. Now faster. Tom, through, Tim, 3, thumb, tax. Tom, through, Tim, 3, thumb, tax. Tom, through, Tim, 3, thumb, tax. You can see it is difficult to switch from an alveolar to a linguodental and back again without practice. This is a short sentence, though, so you should be able to master it fairly quickly. Say it one more time aloud. Good. I found 2 Vietnamese tongue twisters that are sibilants. Try saying these aloud to yourself. Good. Now that your tongue is practiced with the sibilants of your own language, let's try those tongues on a sibilant tongue twister in English. Sally sells seashells by the seashore. Now you try. This one is more difficult. You have a sa, se, si, sha, si, sha sound. So some sh, sha sounds in the middle of s, sa sounds. Sally sells seashells by the seashore. This is difficult for even native speakers. Sally sells seashells by the seashore. Try one last time, as fast as you can. Good. This is an English tongue twister for the velar consonants. Remember, the velars are said from the back of the mouth. The ka and ga sounds. How much ground could a groundhog grind if a groundhog could grind ground? You try it. Good. This one is not as difficult as the sibilant. How much ground could a groundhog grind if a groundhog could grind ground? Try it faster. Good. You have a sense that reading the language aloud can be fun, but it can also be practiced. And the more you practice, the more fun it will be to read aloud. Let's read aloud a popular children's story. This is The Night Before Christmas by Clement Clarke Moore, who wrote it in 1822. I will read aloud, and you listen, and then I will pause for you to read aloud. I will make these pauses at the end of each paragraph. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. Now you try. You can see and you can hear all the rich consonant sounds in English. You can also see and hear all the rich vowel sounds. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap. Now you try. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from the bed to see what was the matter. Away from the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters, and threw up the sash. Now you try. Good. Notice the form of this children's story. It is a poem. We know it is a poem because it is set apart in stanzas with a rhyme scheme. House, mouse, care, there, beds, heads, cap, nap, clatter, matter, flash, sash. Poems are fun to read, not only because they rhyme, but in many cases because they also have rhythm. I'm going to read the next paragraphs without pausing in between them. If you like, you can pause this video and read after each stanza. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver, so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles, his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted, and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, O Comet! On Cupid, on Donder and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all! As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof, and I drew in my hand and was turning around. Down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur, from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up in a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him, in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew, like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night." This is a fun story to read. It contains within it all of the phonological stops that we studied in our last section. You will notice, of course, that there is no mention of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So we will pause for a quick interlude praising that sweet reindeer.
You know Dasher and Dancer and Prancer and Vixen, Comet and Cupid and Donner and Blitzen. But do you recall the most famous reindeer of all? Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose, and if you ever saw it, you would even say it glows. All of the other reindeer used to laugh and call him names. They never let poor Rudolph join in any reindeer games. Then one foggy Christmas Eve, Santa came to say, "Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight?" Then how the reindeer loved him as they shouted out with glee, "Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, you'll go down in history."
Another good way to read aloud is to sing aloud. If you get the chance this Christmas season, sing Christmas carols. That will give you an opportunity to practice your voice in a fun way. Other things we read aloud come from the lectionary. This is a reading from the third Sunday of Advent, from the book of Zephaniah. Shout for joy, O daughter Zion. Sing joyfully, O Israel. Be glad and exult with all your heart, O daughter Jerusalem. The Lord has removed the judgment against you. He has turned away your enemies. The King of Israel, the Lord, is in your midst. You have no further misfortune to fear. Notice that this short reading also contains all of our phonological consonants, all of the sounds that we learned in our lesson on phonology. It has the sibilants, it has the velars, it has the alveolars, it has the palatals, it has the bilabials, and it has quite a number of fricatives. You may, at this point, start to see a pattern. Everything that you learned in the phonology section applies to everything that we will do in the reading section. This is where the fun begins. So, for your first assignment, find some text and read it aloud to someone in your community. Remember the rule. If you cannot captivate your audience, find a captive audience. Next, volunteer to be a listener to someone reading a text aloud to you. In this way, you are volunteering to be a captive audience. Reciprocity is a good thing. This ends today's lesson.